nearly 5,000 library experts will gather to envision the future of the global information ecosystem at the IFLA WLIC 2026 in Busan.
Anchor Min Sun-hee rounds up the world's top headlines, offering a balanced coverage of major issues from Korea and abroad, along with global trends. We deliver Korean current affairs to our global viewers with depth and clarity. Stay up to date with what's happening around the world. The Daily Report. Talk Room invites global figures representing each K-content genre. We uncover their expertise and journeys to success in honest, in-depth dialogue. Retrace their steps, challenges, and insights. And discover the power of K-content impacting the world.
React to outside.
Diplomats Archive, Hidden Stories. Explore the connections between Korea and the world. We cast light on the stories and scenes that lie in the shadows of history. And delve into the human stories of diplomacy woven into the times. Discover the hidden traces of history within the records of diplomacy. Enter the screen as the show begins. Perform Arts Reload. Capturing a live theater experience, we deliver the flow and energy of each performance. Presenting a diverse range of genres, from traditional and contemporary to classical and original. Experience the quality and emotional force of Korean performing arts.
아리랑 라디오 아리랑 고개로 넘어간다 힘껏 달려라 멈추지 마라 세상 끝까지 가자 아리랑 아리랑 가라리요
Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump has extended his deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, saying Washington will hold off striking power plants in the country for 5 days. He also said talks between the U.S. and Iran have seen progress, but Iranian officials denied there were negotiations. South Korea has called on Iran to halt attacks on civilians in Gulf countries and to ensure safe navigation through the Strait of Hormuz during the first phone call between the two countries' foreign ministers since the conflict in the region escalated last month. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has formally labeled South Korea the most hostile state and said the regime's status as a nuclear weapon state will never change, following continued efforts to confront what he described as hostile forces. We begin this morning with the latest on the conflict in the Middle East. The 48-hour countdown for threatened military strikes by the U.S. against Iran's energy infrastructure is on hold. President Donald Trump has ordered a 5-day suspension, citing preliminary negotiations with Tehran aimed at resolving the ongoing conflict. Iranian officials, however, deny that any talks are taking place. Our Kim Do-yeon has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump announced a sudden shift in military plans against Tehran on Monday, saying that talks between the U.S. and Iran have seen progress. While Iran denied that discussions had taken place, President Trump ordered a 5-day postponement of threatened attacks targeting Iranian energy infrastructure. Trump had given Iran 48 hours to reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face attacks on its power plants, but has shifted his stance as that deadline approaches.
I think there's a very good chance we're going to end up in a deal. And so we're giving it 5 days, and then we're going to see where that takes us.
The U.S. leader indicated that initial contact could pave the way for a permanent resolution to the ongoing conflict and address Washington's core demands.
So we are now having really good discussions. They started last night, a little bit, the night before that. And I think they're very good. They want peace. They've agreed they will not have a nuclear weapon.
The suspension is being closely watched by U.S. allies in the region. After a call with President Trump, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu emphasized that any diplomatic outcome must secure his country's strategic goals.
President Trump believes there is a possibility to leveraging the mighty achievements obtained by the IDF and the U.S. military in order to realize the goals of the war in a deal that will preserve our vital interests.
Tehran, however, remains firm that Trump's claims are fake news, with officials accusing Washington of fabricating the talks to buy time. The Iranian military also dismissed Western intelligence reports about the deployment of explosives in regional waterways and reaffirmed its control of the Strait of Hormuz.
Given this level of control and capability, there is no need to lay mines in the Persian Gulf. However, if necessary, we will use all available means to ensure security.
With the 5-day suspension now in effect, Washington's deadline for a negotiated resolution has been extended to this Saturday. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And stocks rose and oil prices plunged after U.S. President Donald Trump said further strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure would be postponed pending negotiations. The Dow Jones Industrial Average on Monday climbed 631 points, or 1.38%, while the S&P 500 gained 1.15% and the Nasdaq rose 1.38%. The rebound helped halt a recent market slide, with the Nasdaq having closed near correction territory on Friday. In energy markets, Brent crude fell nearly 11% to settle at $99.94 per barrel, its first close below $100 since March 11th. U.S. crude dropped more than 10% to $88.13 per barrel, after prices had hit their highest level since July 2022 on Friday. And Seoul has called on Tehran to halt attacks on civilians and civilian facilities in Gulf countries and to ensure safe navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. Foreign Minister Cho Hyun said this in a phone call with his Iranian counterpart, Sayed Abbas Araghchi, on Monday evening. South Korea's foreign ministry says Cho expressed deep concern that the worsening Middle East situation is affecting not only the region, but also global security and economy, asking Iran to stop targeting civilians and public infrastructure, and to help restore normal global energy supplies. Cho also asked for Iran's special attention and support for the safety of South Korean nationals in the country. He noted that many vessels, including South Korean ships, are currently anchored in the Strait of Hormuz and requested necessary safety measures from the Iranian side. Seoul says Araghchi explained Tehran's position, and the two sides agreed to stay in communication. So U.S. President Donald Trump says Iran wants to make a deal, but Iranian officials have denied there were negotiations. For more on this, we're joined today by Mohammed Gouda, professor of Middle East economics at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Professor Gouda, thanks for coming on today.
My pleasure.
So President Trump has extended his deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, saying the United States will hold off striking power plants in the country for 5 days. What does this suggest about U.S. strategy?
Actually, it shows that there are, in my opinion, enormous economic pressures that President Trump is considering. I mean, definitely the rise in oil prices everywhere, and especially for the U.S. citizens and for his voters. I think this initiates some major concerns with President Trump. So any more strikes, any more escalation in conflict, I think this will even raise the prices even more. And I think U.S. is really, very considerate about this. Globally, global economy and global inflation rates are booming. So it's really one very big concern. This is one thing. The second thing is that it's not really clear what President Trump is actually asking, to be honest. The idea that the Strait of Hormuz is closed, well, officially, it's not really closed, right? I mean, Iran is arguing that it's not really closed, it's not officially closed. We didn't declare it's closed. So the end game is still not really clear. I mean, at any moment in time, President Trump can say, actually, it's open, it's working fine, but we're not really sure about it, So the problem is that with all this escalation and with all this conflict, we don't have a clear end goals. Even with the small footsteps towards that end goal, if there is any end goal, we are not really sure how this works. So I think this raises many concerns, and this raises many issues that we need to consider in the next few days. We'll see how this proves to be working or not.
Right. And in response to Trump's 48-hour ultimatum, Iran threatened to hit U.S.-owned energy facilities across the Middle East if Washington attacks its power plants. So how is Iran trying to shape the course of this war?
I think Iran, it's like, for Iran now, it's do or die. They don't have any other chance. They don't have any other ultimatum. This is the end of their regime. So they are doing their best to remain in power. We have also to consider that Iran also have escalated and have said that they can actually attack desalination water stations in Gulf countries. We have to remember that Bahrain and Kuwait, for instance, 100% of their water comes from this desalination stations. So this is really very, very dangerous. And we are talking here about major war happening in the Middle East, a major escalation. Iran, by waging more problems and having this kind of escalation, I think it knows this is also, the tides are not in its favor. And they are doing their best to make everybody suffer because of that. So far, of course, this is a very strategic game, because at the end of the day, this global pressure, global economic pressure that we're all suffering from will be a major concern and major, I would say, determinant of U.S.-Israel next steps in this conflict. Because if we have more economic problems, I think U.S. and Israel will consider this, especially for their constituencies. for their voters in Israel and for the US. So I think Iran is trying to play this, and it's still not clear how this is going to end. But I mean, so far it's clear that Iran is now in a very dire situation and a very stressful situation.
Right, and the situation is also very serious in Lebanon, where more than 1,000 people have been killed there by Israeli strikes and more than 1 million people have been displaced. Is Israel preparing for a large-scale ground invasion of Lebanon?
Thank you so much for this question. This is something actually that's not really covered a lot in the media, I have to say. So thank you for pointing this out. I think over 1 million people were relocated in Lebanon. They are moving away from also conflict and escalation and so on. So this is a major concern also in the Middle East. Regarding your question, to be honest with you, it's very hard to know for sure. But one thing I know for sure, one thing that has been promised by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, that he is reshaping the Middle East. And actually, he's doing it. He's reshaping the Middle East right now. So this is why we have to take what Israel's Prime Minister words. We have to take this very seriously. I think Israel will seize the moment to reshape the Middle East, to make its best out of this moment. It's a really favorable time for Israel with the presence of President Trump in power in U.S. So I think Netanyahu will definitely use this chance, seize the moment to reshape everything and to make Israel reach its best, I would say, best secure dominance so far. So in my point of view, my humble opinion, I think this will happen. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu is very smart, and he will do his best to secure Israeli interest for a long time.
I see, and the war is now already in its 4th week, right? Some say it won't produce a decisive victory for either side. What's your take on this? How do you think this conflict might end?
Yeah, it's very hard, actually. It's very hard. Actually, when we are, tracking President Trump's talks and speeches and so on, it's even very hard to know exactly what's his end game, right? So his speech and his remarks are sometimes very contradictory. On the one hand, he's talking about like destroying Iran, destroying the regime, killing the Ayatollah, toppling the regime. And then the second time, and then after a few days, we're talking here about negotiations, or peace negotiations. That means he's really accepting the regime, and he's accepting the authority of whatever Mujtaba Khamenei is, if he still exists, if he's still alive. So it's really very contradicting, and it's very hard for anybody to know what really happens behind the curtains. One thing that's I think we have to be sure about is that this war is going to end by the words of President Trump. That's it. This is the only thing. And whatever he declares, we will take it as de facto. So this raises a major concern, because President Trump is always changing his speeches and attitude. So we will have to wait and see, but it's really very hectic and very chaotic in the Middle East. And I hope this conflict ends soon, and I hope things settle soon, and we have more secure and more peace in the region in the coming few weeks, hopefully.
Right. We'll have to see how that goes. All right, Professor Gura, thank you so much for your time and insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has declared South Korea the regime's most hostile state, warning of harsh retaliation if Pyongyang is provoked. The remarks came as Russia's Vladimir Putin congratulated Kim on his re-election, signaling deepening ties between Moscow and Pyongyang. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has formally labeled South Korea the most hostile state and warned of merciless consequences if Pyongyang is provoked. According to the Korean Central News Agency on Tuesday, Kim made the remarks on the final day of the first session of the Supreme People's Assembly. declaring that Seoul has now been officially designated as North Korea's principal adversary. He warned that South Korea would pay the price for any provocation and reaffirmed that North Korea's status as a nuclear weapons state will never change, vowing continued efforts to confront what he described as hostile forces. The comments came as Kim secured a third consecutive term as chairman of the State Affairs Commission, the country's top policy guidance body created in 2016. His re-election was confirmed during the parliamentary session held on Sunday. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin congratulated Kim on his re-election and expressed hope for deeper cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang. In a message released by the Kremlin on Monday, Putin praised Kim's role in strengthening what he called a friendly and allied relationship between the two countries, adding that continued collaboration would serve their fundamental national interests. Ties between Russia and North Korea have strengthened in recent years. The two countries signed a mutual defense treaty in 2024, and North Korea has sent troops to support Russia's war effort in Ukraine. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov also said Kim has a standing invitation to visit Russia, noting that Moscow would welcome him once diplomatic channels finalize the timing. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
On the local front, President Lee Jae-myung chaired a high-level defense meeting and called for stronger defense capabilities as geopolitical uncertainty continues to grow. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yu-jit reports.
President Lee Jae-myung has again underscored the importance of strong self-reliant defense capabilities.
그리고 이 국방은 누구에게도 맡겨서는 안 될 우리 스스로가 완벽하게 최종적으로 책임져야 될 핵심입니다. 우리가 어떤 상황이 처하더라도 누구의 도움도 받지 않고 스스로
He presided over the first Central Integrated Defense Council meeting of his administration at the Blue House on Monday. The council convenes officials from the government, the military, and the civilian sector to assess the country's defense readiness and review key policy outcomes. Under South Korean law, it must meet at least once a year. There, President Lee described self-reliant defense as the key to South Korea's defense system, citing an, quote, increasingly complex and rapidly changing geopolitical environment.
민, 관, 군, 경, 소방 등 모든 방위 요소가 유사시 한 몸처럼 일사불란하게 대응할 수 있어야 국가와 국민을 지켜낼 수 있습니다.
He called for being better prepared so the country can defend itself under any circumstances, but while also expressing confidence in South Korea's capabilities. He noted that the country's annual defense spending is about 1.4 times North Korea's GDP and that its military strength ranks 5th in the world. The president's remarks come as calls for a stronger self-reliant defense have grown recently, especially after reports that some U.S. forces' Korea assets could be deployed to the Middle East in response to the U.S. war in Iran.
국제 질서의 영향에 따라서 외부의 지원이 없어질 경우 우리의 뜻과 다르게, 우리의 의지와 다르게 그럴 경우는 얼마든지 발생할 수 있죠.
Also, the Pentagon's latest national defense strategy states that, quote, South Korea is capable of taking primary responsibility for deterring North Korea with critical but more limited U.S. support. The fact that President Lee personally chaired the meeting, typically led by the Prime Minister, highlights his focus on strengthening an integrated defense system. As the situation in the Middle East continues and inter-Korean relations remain strained. Song Yu-jin, Arirang News.
South Korea's producer prices increased for the 6th consecutive month in February, driven primarily by rising global oil prices. The Bank of Korea on Tuesday said the producer price index for February stood at 123.25. This represents a 0.6% increase from the previous month and a 2.4% jump from a year earlier. The central bank attributes this increase to rising global crude oil prices, which rose by more than 10% in February compared to January. Consequently, domestic coal and petroleum products rose 4.0% overall. Specifically, prices for diesel and naphtha spiked 7.4% and 8.7% respectively. Financial insurance activities also surged 5.2%, largely due to higher stock brokerage commissions. On the retail front, BTS fans are fueling remarkable domestic consumption with their purchase of K-pop related products. Our Kim Junong takes a closer look.
These are characters inspired by BTS members, items that targeted fans visiting Seoul for the concert. Shelves filled with merchandise featuring their photos and names. This is K-Wave, a K-pop specialty store inside a duty-free shop in Myeongdong, one of Seoul's busiest shopping districts.
Items like magnets and puzzles kept selling out, even after repeated restocking. We've also seen a more diverse mix of customers, with more visitors from outside Asia, and the impact extended beyond our K-pop booth to nearby food and fashion sections.
Since early in the morning, fans have been coming in, eager to connect with their favorite artists.
I came to Korea for the free BTS concert. There are many places selling merchandise in Myeongdong, but I prefer this store because it's well organized and has official goods.
Dedicated entirely to K-pop merchandise, stores like this are becoming major destinations for fans visiting Korea. And the impact is visible in the numbers, with a sharp increase in visitors ahead of the concert. Foreign shopper numbers at the duty-free shop rose 32% from a week earlier, while BTS merchandise sales at a K-pop specialty store increased more than fivefold. The impact reached beyond duty-free shops, with spending spilling over into the broader retail sector. At one convenience store chain, sales at 10 outlets near Gwanghwamun nearly quadrupled compared to the same days a week earlier. Stores located closer to the concert venue saw an even sharper increase, with sales jumping more than 6 times. This surge across the retail sector underscores the distinctive nature of fan-driven consumption.
Fan-driven spending is typically more intense, reflecting a stronger interest in Korea than that of general consumers. This demand is also spreading beyond BTS to other products with distinct Korean elements. If the trend continues, it could spread to general overseas travelers through social media, supporting long-term positive spillovers.
ARMY-nomics is now visible in the data, showing how a cultural phenomenon is translating into a tangible economic impact. Kim Junong, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. A new report released on Monday shows that the timing of joint U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran on February 28th was changed by newly surfaced intelligence. According to Reuters, a meeting between Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and top military officials at his Tehran compound was moved from the night of the 28th to the morning, narrowing an already fragile window for a potential decapitation strike. That shift set off an urgent call between U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Trump had already approved a strike against Iran in principle, but was still debating the timing. Netanyahu pressed that the moment might never return, with intelligence now showing Iran's leadership in one place. Trump ultimately made the call that triggered Operation Epic Fury and killed Khamenei. In the U.S., a passenger jet landing at New York LaGuardia Airport crashed into a fire truck on the runway, killing both pilots. The Air Canada flight collided with the vehicle just before midnight Sunday as it touched down from Montreal. Officials say the fire truck had clearance to cross the runway while responding to another aircraft. Air traffic control recordings capture a last-second warning telling the truck to stop. The impact destroyed the cockpit, killed both pilots, and injured dozens on board and on the ground. Investigators are looking into how runway coordination failed. In Colombia, a military aircraft carrying more than 120 people crashed in the country's southwest. The Hercules C-130 transport plane went down just after takeoff on Monday near Puerto Leguizamo in Putumayo province. Officials say 121 people were on board, mostly soldiers. At least one person died and 77 were injured, with rescue efforts still ongoing. Authorities say the aircraft went down just 2 kilometers from the airport, but they have not confirmed the cause. Colombian pop star Shakira will perform in Madrid this September, building a custom venue for tens of thousands of fans. Organizers say the singer will stage 6 shows in September at a purpose-built site holding up to 50,000 people. The venue will be built at Madrid's Iberdrola Music Grounds on the city's outskirts and will operate under the name Macondo Park. Promoters say the project will center on Latin culture.
Spring is really settling in now. Yesterday, Seoul climbed above 20 degrees Celsius, meaning there was no need for a jacket to go outdoors. While today will be slightly cooler but still mild with a high of 17 degrees Celsius here in the capital. In fact, this week will feel more like late April. Meanwhile, the air is getting drier. Dry weather alerts are being in place across many regions, including here in the capital. And with the risk of wildfires increasing, extra caution is needed. Also, air quality continues to be a concern. With stagnant air in addition to dust moving in on northeasterly winds, skies will remain quite hazy today in most parts of Korea under lots of clouds coverage. And this afternoon, highs in most parts will be in the upper teens, getting up to 17 degrees here in Seoul, Gwangju, getting up to 20 degrees Celsius. Then rain will begin late tonight on Jeju, spread to the southern coast early tomorrow morning before tapering off during the day.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
How to survive in Korea. Barbecue restaurants. Step 1. Taking care of your clothes. Put your jacket in the plastic bag. Seal it tight. If the stool flips open, store your clothes inside. Wearing light colors, grab an apron. It's the best defense against oil splatter and smoke. Step 2. Bottomless side dishes. Basic side dishes at a barbecue restaurant. Eat, and eat as much as you want. Side dishes come with free refills. Oh, and if you don't see this sign, just ask, 사장님, 여기 밑반찬 좀 더 주세요. Simple, isn't it? Step 3. Grilling meat. There are various kinds of samgyeopsal in Korea. Place the meat on the grill. Turn it over when golden. And again when it looks done. Again and again and again. Step 4. Sam style. You aren't taking bites of sam like a taco, are you? In Korea, we have it in one bite. A pro tip here. Add only as much as you can handle in a bite. Gotta avoid awkward situations. Step 5. Enjoy the perks. After the meal, enjoy the perks offered as a Korean restaurant. Fabric refreshers get rid of the barbecue smell, while mint candies freshen your breath. Did you survive the barbecue restaurant? Hang on. Are you here with someone you want to impress? Then let's skip the garlic. Who knows what will happen?
내가 지키고 있던 가끔 떠오르면 괴롭던 난 망가질 차례가 됐어 넌 모르게 난 빌었지 다 망가지라고 그러면은 함께 할 수는 있겠지. 내 이름도 가끔 어렵지만 빈 그릇과 반찬통을 새기 반해버린 하얀 소나타를 매일 습관처럼 되뇌이며 살고 싶어.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insight, new styles, and new topics every day. We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you is Tuesday, March 24th here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Ki.
Good morning.
Good morning. Also, Fabi is with us.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So as we head into the second day of the work week, we're turning to something a little softer and a lot more heartwarming. So yesterday marked International Puppy Day, a celebration of our loyal, lovable puppies who bring so much joy into our lives. So Keith, let me ask you, are you a dog person?
I am a dog person, but honestly, I did not know it was the International Puppy Day until yesterday. But then I was looking at my phone, and it was the most popular search engine in Korea, the N one, the green one that everyone knows. And I realized it was the International Puppy Day as it was boldly printed right there in the main page with this logo. But raising a dog used to be a complicated issue for me because I had a big trauma. I was bitten by a dog and had to have a big surgery when I was young. I had a lot of stitches. So a big dog on the street just suddenly attacked me when I was, I think, 7 or 8 year old. And it scared me for a long time. And I guess that sort of became a small PTSD I had been suffering. Then when I was studying abroad in the States at my aunt's house, she had a beagle, and I was with her for 3 years, raising her, giving her food and snacks, running around the neighborhood together, and I guess my sickness sort of cured, and now I'm okay with a dog. As a matter of fact, I wish I could raise a dog right now. So
you really have evolved over the years in terms of your relationship with dogs, I see.
Exactly.
What about you, Fabio?
Well, that's a very good transformation. Thank God, because I'm also a dog lover and I really like them. They're so cute. Whenever I have the chance to pet them, I always cuddle up. I let them lick my hands. And I think that comes from the fact that I never had a pet. Whenever I would try to tell my mother, please, can we have a dog? She would be like, no. So I get it. There's a lot of responsibility going on, but I tend to hang out pretty good with them and I have a very good bark.
Can we hear it? Do I want to ask? that was really good.
So yeah, I feel like I connect with them on a spiritual level.
Real quick, so in Korea and in the States, there's different sound effects or sounds for animal sounds. So in the States, we say wolf, right? In Korea, we say 멍멍. What is it in Spain?
In Spain, we would say wow, wow. Like,
wow.
Wow.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
cute. That's cute. Okay, I see. So we're going to talk more about this. But first, let's take a look at the screen. International Puppy Day is celebrated each year on March 23rd to honor our four-legged companions and to raise awareness about their welfare and rights. And here in Korea, that conversation is gaining momentum as pets are now officially allowed to accompany their owners into restaurants and cafes. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at how people are reacting to pet-friendly dining, how it compares to practices across Europe, and what this shift tells us about the growing conversation around animal rights. As we just saw in the video, our relationship with pets is clearly evolving, and now the law is starting to catch up. So, what exactly changed under the new rules starting this month, Ki?
Sure. So starting this month, a revised rule under the Food Sanitation Act is now in effect, and meaning pets are officially allowed in restaurants and cafes, something that used to be largely off limits. This really reflects a shift in how people see their pets. More and more, they're treated as family, not just animals, and as spending and lifestyles around pets continue to grow, the law is simply catching up with that trend. In Korea, nearly 30% of the population now owns a pet, so this kind of change was in many ways inevitable.
Right, so this really reflects how pets are no longer just animals, but family for many people here. But with that shift also comes new responsibilities and standards. So what do businesses have to do to allow pets inside?
Well, establishments are now allowed to bring pets inside, but they're not allowed to do so freely. In fact, a lot of establishments right now are dealing with the fact that they have to comply with a lot of policies and regulations. For example, to officially register a place as a pet-friendly space, business owners need to get a permit from a local government, and they would have to meet 10 different types of criteria. Most of these legal framework only covers dogs and cats, but for now, most of this criteria also focuses on the physical layout itself. For example, spaces should have a separation between them so that the pets from one table wouldn't be a disturbance for the other table. Some spaces would have to dispose of this type of like leash type of anchors, or even like specific sitting areas for these pets. And in some cases, if the layout itself doesn't provide it, they might need to install some types of partitions or screens that would allow a separation from the pet and the dining area or even the cooking area, specifically for these hygienic reasons. So there's a lot of concerns around this, and it is true that for a lot of businesses, this can become a burden of some sort, because in the past, a lot of cafes would brand themselves as pet-friendly cafes, but nowadays, because of these restrictions, if they are not able to follow, they would have very severe penalties, like for example, not being able to do business for around more than 20 days. So it does become a little bit of a hustle, but it does also create a safer environment for everyone.
So like you said, it does seem like quite a long checklist, which is why you can see why some business owners might hesitate given the potential penalties. And it seems those concerns aren't limited to business owners alone. So how are people kind of reacting to this? Are they generally supportive of this?
Well, from the perspective of pet owners, though, some say the new rules feel a bit too strict, too much. And in the past, regulations were somewhat vague, so businesses often allowed pets at their own discretion. Now that the guidelines are more detailed, some places are actually opting to go no pet zones instead. On the other hand, people who aren't fond of animals are pushing back as well. Many say the idea of animals entering dining space simply doesn't feel hygienic. As a matter of fact, if you're looking at the screen right now, according to a survey conducted last year, 68% of respondents were against allowing pets in restaurants, whereas only 32% would allow pets in the restaurant. And since this is a still early stage of the policy rollout, a wide range of reaction is emerging. The key now will be finding a more balanced and workable approach moving forward.
Right, so it looks like we're seeing a clear divide between pet owners who want more freedom and others who are worried about hygiene and comfort. So that raises an interesting question about how maybe other countries are handling this. So how do Korea's pet policies, Fabi, compare to those in Europe?
Well, compared to Korea, Europe does seem to have a more open and culturally involved type of attitude when it comes to pets. So in theory, there should be less restrictions, but in practice, reality is a little bit more nuanced. So for example, in Spain in 2023, the Animal Welfare Act did allow a lot of pets to come legally into these spaces. So for restaurants, for example, it would be the owner's type of responsibility when it came to managing that type of disturbance, including noise or hygiene. But at the same time, when we really think about it, most of the housing communities or cafes and restaurants would not allow pets inside in Europe too. And that's because of these exact same reasons. But it is true that countries like Spain, France, or Italy, specifically Mediterranean countries, do have a very strong terrace culture. And so because of that, having an open air space where people can hang out does allow to find it very natural to find these customers that do bring their pets with them. And most of the time, the restrictions are not that harsh. You don't even need a leash most of the time, and as long as the pet behaves and doesn't really create a problem to other customers, it's pretty natural to see this type of pets coming into restaurants and cafes. Sometimes even some businesses would provide special water bowls for these pets. So I feel like pets are considered just part of the family.
So it's quite different culturally, I see, that they're allowed to go in without leashes in restaurants as well. So in many parts of Europe, it's already part of everyday culture, especially with more flexible owner-led decisions. So it'll be worth watching whether Korea moves in a similar direction over time or finds its own balance. So we also wanted to hear directly from our viewers. We ran a poll on the Arirang News YouTube channel asking, what do you think about allowing pets in restaurants? So here's what the results showed. So opinions do appear quite divided, with about 70% saying pets should not be allowed in dining spaces, citing concerns such as hygiene and comfort, while the remaining 30% are in favor, reflecting growing acceptance of pets as part of everyday life. So the results are quite telling. So while pet culture is clearly growing, concerns over hygiene and shared spaces still seem to outweigh acceptance for a lot of people. And to get a more personal perspective, we're going to speak with a pet owner. And that conversation is coming up right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Alyssa, a dog owner from Germany. So hello, Alyssa. Thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hello, my dog is going to leave. He's very confused right now. What's going on?
He's so cute though. So Alyssa, can you tell us about the star of today's show, your dog, and how you came to own him?
Yes. So my star today is Udi. His name is Udi, like dog. He is 6.5 years old, a Coton de Tuléa, and I bought him in Germany. He was originally supposed to be a service dog because I had an anxiety disorder back then, but that kind of backfired because he later turned out to have autism, so now I'm taking care of him. But it works out because I can focus all my anxiety on him now. We came to Korea together in 2022. Yes, that's all about him right now.
Right. We've been talking about allowing pets in Korea in the cafes and restaurants. Then how about in Germany? Are pets allowed in restaurants or cafes there?
Yes, in Germany, it's already the law that generally dogs and cats are allowed, or like mostly dogs are allowed in cafes and restaurants. However, there are some restrictions, so they have to stay in the guest area. So if there is like open food, like for example a buffet, they are not allowed to enter that stage for hygiene reasons as well. And we have a very strict law about leash culture. Like leashes are mandatory everywhere, so you cannot just let your dog walk around without leashes. And in Germany, the culture concerning pets, or especially dogs, is different. So you see them as kind of part of as a family, but you don't treat them like children like in Korea. They're still seen as animals, so they don't have their own chairs in a restaurant. They just are on the ground. Also on the subway, they're allowed to come in, but they're not allowed on the seats or anywhere. They are on the ground. So it's very like a different culture because they're more like, I feel closer to the family in Germany, but they're also separated from humans.
And are regular customers uncomfortable with these pets in cafes or restaurants in Germany?
So when I was with my puppy in Germany and we went to cafes and restaurants, we never had like any experience that people were uncomfortable. However, he's a very small dog, so I don't know if that also is the same with bigger dogs. But in Germany, we also have a culture of having bigger dogs, so I'm already an exception with a small dog. I would say usually people are not like, they think it's okay. However, only if they don't disturb people. Like if they're just under the table, lying, sitting, then it's okay. If they keep standing up, barking, like moving their chairs, of course, the restaurant owner, the cafe owner will say something. But especially outside areas, like what you said before, like terrace, no one cares.
I see. Well, I can't imagine anyone feeling uncomfortable after they look at your dog and see how cute he is.
So cute.
In Germany, people don't find him that cute, actually. So in Germany, we have a better like way of living, like with pets. But smaller dogs are not considered that cute. So in Korea, people actually are more friendly to my dog. In Germany, to dogs as a whole.
That's so interesting. I guess that's the difference in culture. All right, thank you so much for coming on with your dog.
Thank you for having me. It went well.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Thank you.
So we just heard from a dog owner from Germany about her dog, whether pets are generally allowed in restaurants and cafes there, and how the needs of people who aren't uncomfortable around dogs are taken into consideration. So this also ties into a broader conversation happening here in Korea. So what other discussions are emerging around, I guess, animal rights in Korea these days?
Right, so last year we saw the introduction of a standardized pet adoption contract. It was developed and distributed by a group of lawyers focused on animal rights protection. The idea is to discourage people from getting pets through illegal pet shops and instead encourage proper adoption procedures so that owners take on a greater sense of responsibility from the start. It's not mandatory yet, but the fact that a system like this now exists is definitely a positive and meaningful step forward.
Right, and that's an encouraging step, moving toward more responsible pet ownership from the very beginning. And beyond adoption, there's also a legal shift being discussed. So are there efforts, Fabio, to change the legal status of animals?
There is definitely a growing momentum when it comes to changing the status, the legal status of these pets, and much of that comes from a shift in perspective, a shift in mentality. Now people don't really consider pets just as objects or property, but rather as a part of their family, like a real living entity. You see, under current Korean civil law, animals are still classified as property, but it feels like most owners don't really reflect that type of sentiment. Most of them consider, as we just mentioned, this animals as part of their whole life, not as something that they own and can just like maneuver around. And because these are becoming living beings that should be considered, there should be some dignity considered in the whole spectrum. And so this moral code that most owners right now have is not being reflected legally. So this, if this is going to be, this amendment is going to be passed, it could lead to stricter penalties also for other issues like abandonment or even abuse. And it would help prevent this mistreatment that sometimes it's a little bit hard to define if the legal framework is not well prepared. So I do feel like dignity can legally be could come to these pets in anytime soon here in Korea.
Right, I hope so too. So I think this could be a real turning point, especially in strengthening protections against abuse and abandonment. But at the same time, with stronger rights also comes greater responsibility. So how can pet owners be more responsible?
You just sound like Spider-Man's uncle with a greater power.
Greater responsibility.
So for people who have or are thinking about getting pets, it's worth asking a very honest question. Can you truly care for this animal like a member of your family? One of the biggest challenges in raising any pet for me comes down to time, because with my busy schedule and unstable schedules, it's often difficult for me to provide a consistent day-to-day care that animals need. Especially for a dog, I need to walk them outside time to time, give them food, and just generally take care of them like my own child, but it's just challenging. And there's also an urgent need to crack down on illegal breeding operation and stop irresponsible distribution at a source. And most importantly, bringing a pet home just because they're cute and then abandoning them later is something that should never happen.
Right, I think that's a great reminder. Owning a pet is a long-term commitment, not just a moment of affection. And at the same time, coexistence means considering everyone in shared spaces. So how should pet owners respect those who don't like animals, Fabio?
I feel like for a lot of pet owners, it's kind of a hard concept to grasp, the fact that a lot of people are not used to interacting with them. Even though we live in a society where it's common to see an animal, society is not really designed for us to cater to animals, but rather cater to humans. So a lot of people feel that it's unnecessary to have to deal with those animals in that social context. It can become an uncomfortable situation, especially due to concerns regarding hygiene, noise, or also even the unpredictability of those animals. So as we just saw in the interview, as Elisa mentioned, maybe a small dog doesn't really become a threat to people, but the bigger it becomes, you know, people will have that kind of like alarm set in when it comes to animals. So I feel like for owners, it's all about finding the balance so that the context itself works.
I agree. So as pets become an even bigger part of our lives, the conversation is clearly shifting from simple companionship to shared responsibility. And finding the right balance between animal rights, public comfort, and practical regulation will be key moving forward. And in the end, it's about creating a culture where both people and pets can coexist with respect and care. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. But News Gen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Ki.
Thank you.
For coming, and also Fabio.
Thank you for having me.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. And if you're a pet owner, I hope your next meal out comes with your furry friend. We are
News Generation.
Set the facts straight. Get Korea right. K-culture is sweeping the globe. K-pop, K-drama, K-movie, K-food, and even K-beauty. Korean cultural content is gaining more and more fans worldwide. It's indeed the golden age of K-culture. But with this growing interest comes an increase in misinformation about Korea. There's so much inaccurate information out there. Even AI can sometimes get it wrong. So, we must set things straight and correct all the misinformation. So here's the plan. The Voluntary Agency Network of Korea, VANK, and Arirang TV present the Get Korea Right project. Our goal is to provide accurate information on important keywords that come to mind when we think of Korea. Blatant errors and false claims that distort history. It's time to set the record straight, sharing the true history and culture of Korea while raising the national brand. Let's get started with Get Korea Right. Are you ready to join?
Good evening and welcome to the 10 o'clock edition of Arirang News. Thanks for joining us on this special day, a day in which Arirang TV first goes on the air.
Arirang TV is Korea's first.